And I think there's a lot of pressure to post daily and to post reels and grid posts and do carousels and do videos and do everything. And all that can be tremendously overwhelming. And really, it's about quality, and it's about the quality of what you're doing and its relevance instead of quantity. The bottom line is that likes and follows are not leads.
Welcome to Architecture Business Club, the show that helps you build a better business in architecture so you can enjoy more freedom, flexibility and fulfillment. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Susie Lober helps architects harness the power of marketing to get more of the work they want. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all the different marketing tools and tactics, Susie will help you identify what's most relevant to your business with down-to-earth practical advice. She's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing with over 20 years experience marketing for architects both in practice and independently. She's also an editor of the RIBA publication Cambridge Architecture. To sign up for Susie's marketing tips email newsletter, head over to Low Marketing, that's L-O marketing.co.uk and enter your details. Susie, welcome to Architecture Business Club.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
That's great to have you here. We've been talking about doing this for a little while and we finally made it happen, which is great. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Before we dig into it though, Susie, I'd love to know a bit more about how do you spend your time outside of work? What do you like to do when you're not working?
I'm an art lover, so I love to get out to art exhibitions or open studios or even do a bit of sketching and creating collages myself. But realistically, I don't get much time to do that. What I do is I spend a lot of time cooking. I'm a keen cook, making homemade healthy food, so everything from kimchi to bread. So I spend a lot of time cooking. And I enjoy keeping fit as well, staying active. So I'm out walking every day. I do HIIT workouts and other sort of high intensity training as well.
You sound like you're a very, very busy lady. We're going to talk about 5 of the biggest marketing time wasters, because it is very easy to waste time and energy on marketing. We're going to talk about that so that architects can make better use of the time that they spend marketing their practice. So I think this is going to be a really useful conversation for them. A lot of business owners certainly feel the pressure to jump on the next biggest marketing trend. This is the first big time waster that we're going to talk about. You know, whether that's kind of TikTok or Threads or whatever the next trend might be. What are your thoughts on chasing trends?
Yeah, absolutely. I think trends can be such a distraction for small business owners and solo practitioners, and it can be really tempting to just jump on the bandwagon of the latest thing. The most important thing to bear in mind is always start with your audience and start with where are they. Otherwise, chasing trends is a bit like redecorating your shop window without actually opening and unlocking the door and inviting people into the conversation. You need to invite the right people in the first place. Okay,
that makes sense. So you mentioned there about it being, well, keeping the audience in mind before we start chasing those trends. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really important as part of your marketing strategy as an architect to know what you're targeting. What are the types of projects that you want to win? Who do you want to be working with? And then your marketing needs to go to them. So you need to go to where your audience is. So it's really worth spending a bit of time at the outset thinking about what is your marketing strategy and who it is you're targeting.
Interesting. So you mentioned there about going to where your audience is. So in that example, if let's just say the trend was, say, TikTok videos or something, that if your audience, your ideal customers are not there, or that's not the place where they mainly hang out online, despite the fact that maybe that is a trend that a lot of people are talking about, it doesn't make sense for your business to be there on TikTok. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, TikTok can be great fun. and so can a lot of the other trends. But you need to be thinking about what's the outcome for you. And I spend quite a lot of time doing interviews for my clients, and talking about where they are and where they spend their time. And I don't think, out of the tens of interviews that I've done, whether that is for people who are homeowners or whether it's for people who are working in Cambridge colleges or whether it's people who are working as developers, I don't think it's ever come up that that's where they're spending the majority of their time. And if they are, that's their downtime. That's their, relaxing time, not necessarily looking to interact with people in that way.
Are there any trends that you've noticed in particular that have come up in the last year or two where you've noticed that people have been wasting time?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's been really tricky in terms of social media because it's become so fragmented, and with the demise of Twitter and with Meta becoming more difficult to engage with, a lot of people have been wondering where to go next and what to look into next. So there's been a lot more experimentation with Threads, looking into Blue Sky and all the different options that are coming up. I mean, they're not necessarily a waste of time because that might be the next big thing. Blue Sky is a really nice environment and it's quite similar to Twitter or X, but it's about using it with intention. So knowing why you're going into it. And I think that's the biggest time waster, is just not being intentional about why you're doing it. I mean, hanging out on TikTok or Threads or other areas can be great areas to sort of pick up ideas, pick up different ways of doing things. But is it actually part of a kind of plan for your business to generate business?
Yeah, got it. That leads nicely actually onto the next point we were going to talk about. So we talked about chasing trends and how that can be a huge time waster. We were going to talk about social media generally next and about chasing those vanity metrics. I mean, social media can be a huge time suck. I mean, particularly for sole practitioners and sort of micro-size practices, especially if you get caught up kind of worrying about like likes and follows and views and those kind of metrics. How can we tell if social media is actually helping or hindering our business? How can we tell if it's having the right impact for our businesses?
The bottom line is that likes and follows are not leads. So fantastic if you're posting stuff and it's getting hundreds of likes and you've got thousands of followers. But is that actually translating into leads for work? So it's more important to measure the important stuff like conversations, inquiries, referrals. They are going to have a much more significant impact on your business than the vanity metrics of how many followers you have. And if social media is not bringing you work, then it's time to rethink what you're posting and why you're posting it.
Do you think that most business owners just feel that they just have to be on social media, irrespective of whether it brings in leads?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a huge sort of pressure, that sense of being afraid of missing out, that they have to be there, they have to be doing it. And it is possible to run a practice and be very successful and not do social media at all, if that's not your thing. And that's partly what good marketing is about as well. It's doing the things that, it's that balance of, is it where your audience is? Is it something that you enjoy? And is it something that is relevant to your business? And if it's not hitting all of those 3 points, there's no point in doing it, because then it just becomes a chore and it becomes difficult and you're going to shy away from it and constantly put it to the bottom of your list if it's a struggle. So I would really reflect on, is it where your audience is? Is it something that you enjoy? And is it relevant to your business?
Those are some really great questions to be asking ourselves for sure. I think as well that with social media, there are ways that you can still have or be seen to have a regular presence there, to be visible without necessarily having to spend loads and loads of time reinventing the wheel, showing up every day. You could have a selection of posts that you recycle. There are evergreen content schedulers out there where you could have some posts that are just kind of drip feeding out just so that we're here. We'll just remind everybody that we're here, but it's not necessarily your primary marketing focus. It might not be somewhere where you would actively getting all of your leads from. Maybe there's somewhere else, or something else you're doing in your business that's working really well for you.
And I think there's a lot of pressure to post daily and to post reels and grid posts and do carousels and do videos and do everything. And all that can be tremendously overwhelming. And really, it's about quality, and it's about the quality of what you're doing and its relevance instead of quantity. And I've worked with architecture practices before where we've really built up a strong, meaningful following on platforms like LinkedIn by just posting once a week. And I think sometimes if it's intentional, if it's well crafted, that can be enough.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Quality over quantity every time. Yeah. Well, we were going to look at actually content next. It's another area where people can waste an awful lot of time. So and essentially this is producing content for content's sake without having that strategy. And we often do hear that we need to be constantly pumping out content to stay visible online, whether that's there's a variety of different content that we could use. It could be that it's a blog, that it's video, that it's podcasting, any kind of content that we could be using. But how do we make sure that this content actually does have a purpose and we're not just producing it content for content's sake, just because that's what we are hearing that we need to do from a lot of the marketing gurus out there?
And I think that's a real risk in the age of AI, is because it has become so quick and easy to create huge volumes of content that you could just be churning out, exactly as you say, John, just content for content's sake. And without a plan, it's just clutter. You're just adding to the noise. And really, every piece of content needs to have a purpose. So is it to build trust? Is it to answer questions? Are you showing proof? I often work with architects in creating a marketing strategy, and that includes working on, what are your unique selling points, and creating content pillars or content buckets, and thinking about, I'm going to post content in, say, 4 key areas, and my content is always going to fit into one of those buckets. So whether it is about residential design and sustainable living and how to retrofit your home, whether it's about the how to get planning applications and your skills and expertise in that, or maybe it's more about your personality and just getting to know you and that building trust element. But each thing you post always fits into one of those pillars and emphasizes one of your USPs.
I love that idea of content pillars. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah. As you say, that you can use those to sort of amplify those different USPs of your practice and talk about those different topics intentionally, rather than just kind of posting randomly, which I've certainly done lots of random posting in the past.
Yeah, I think we all have. You all fall into that trap sometimes, or you just, jump on a trend and you think, oh yeah, I'll give that a go without really thinking of its relevance.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think it's okay sometimes to do that if those other foundations are in place with the rest of the content. Susie, let's talk about websites. This is another area where people waste an awful lot of time. I certainly have over the years, for sure. It's important to have an up-to-date website, of course it is. I think we all appreciate that. But it's very easy to fall into the trap of endlessly tweaking our websites. So how can we avoid that? How can we avoid wasting time on our websites and making sure that we get done the essential bits that need to get done, but we're not just wasting time faffing around?
Yeah, there's a lot of faffing, isn't there? It's so tempting, especially as designers, that we want it to look perfect and we want it to present the project in just the right way. And it can get so frustrating when it's not quite as perfect as you want it to be. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be clear and it needs to be credible and it needs to help people take the next step, which is ultimately to get in touch with you and to contact you about a project. So becoming fixated on what your tagline's going to be and endlessly changing that or endlessly tinkering with which projects appear and where they appear on the page, it can waste so much time because the tweaking is just procrastination. And actually, you just need to get it good enough and then get it out there. Because you're just procrastinating on actually just getting it out there and letting people know where it is. And there's so many good tools around now that can also help you to understand how your users are actually using the website. You know, a lot of people will spend a lot of time faffing around about different aspects of how to organize projects on their website, when the reality is a lot of people don't go, to use a sort of publishing terminology, below the first fold, and they're just not scrolling down your page that far. And there's some really nice tools you can use like Hotjar and Google Analytics, which will show you how users are actually using your site and what they're doing, so that you can avoid wasting time tinkering around with areas that they actually might not even be looking at.
Yeah, we care far more about our own work. I think particularly when you are a sole practitioner or a really small company, we get so, and as creatives generally, we get so emotionally tied to our work, and a website project, whether that's a self-built site or a site that you're working with a developer on, you put a lot of time and energy into this project to get this site live, and we do get really tied to it and probably overthink a lot of it. I know that I have, and I remember the first website that I had for my architecture business when I had a side hustle originally. I spent months on this website and a lot of money as well. And I was trying to do so much with it. I was trying to add so much content, so many different pages and sections. And I wanted it to be this big, amazing thing when it launched. And as a consequence, it's just never kind of fully realised. And I just tried to do far too much. I would have been far better just to have had a really simple, clear site with some very clear calls to actions and ways for customers to contact me so that I could generate leads from the website without worrying about all the other stuff, because actually a lot of that other stuff could have just been added incrementally over time if I wanted to add it, if there was a valid business case for spending the time on doing it. But I tried to do all of this work up front, and it just made it into this really big, unmanageable project where, it just was far bigger, more complex site than it ever needed to be. As you say, a lot of people, they go on and they might just look at the first half of the first page and go, okay, these people sound okay. I'll just click the contact now button now and I won't bother with the rest of that.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to get people who want to dig deep and explore it really far, but you're also going to get the people, as you say, who are just going to jump on your site, ratify you are who you say you are and what you do, and it looks good and professional, and then they're just ready to pick up the phone and get on with it. But it comes back to what we were saying earlier. It's about quality and not quantity. And getting that clarity of message is really hard. That is something that is really hard to do well. And often it's difficult to get, like you say, because you're so close to the work, it's difficult to get an outsider's perspective and put yourself in the client's shoes of what matters, what are they looking for, is this interesting, is this relevant. And I think this relates back to what we were talking to about content earlier, and content for content's sake. What you want to be thinking about is, how does this help my client? How is it helpful to them? And that might be that it inspires them, that it shows that you as an architect have got the vision of what could happen to their home, how they could transform that derelict building, what they could do with a blank site. That may be the primary purpose, that it's there to inspire. But it also might be something else. They might want to know that you are adept to dealing with listed buildings. They might want to know that you've got the skills to understand what's involved with an airtightness test to achieve passive house. So it could be any number of things, but it's about putting yourself in your client's shoes and thinking, well, what are they going to get out of this? What might they be looking for? I really loved the podcast she did recently with Rachel Extance, where she was talking about using your website like a magazine. And that's a brilliant one to go and have a listen to if you're thinking about doing some work on your website.
Oh, thanks for the plug there, Susie. Yeah, I think some other resources that I really love when it comes to thinking about content generally, so this and especially content for your website, is the approach to content marketing that Marcus Sheridan takes. He wrote a book called They Ask You Answer, and that's a really great book to read. I'm sure there's probably videos, YouTube videos and podcast interviews of Marcus talking where you can learn more about that. But it is about really putting yourself in the shoes of your customers and answering the real questions that they have about working with you. You know, what are the thoughts that are going through their mind when they're looking for an architect or an architectural designer to work with on their project? And often they're not the same things that you might automatically feel to share. Like you mentioned, that absolutely there's value in sharing your portfolio and your work to help inspire them. But in addition to that, there's all these other queries and questions that they have in mind that need to be answered for them to be ready enough to make that next step with you or to eventually become a customer. It's rich pickings for content because there's so many things that you could create content on, blog articles and features on your website. So, but it is all about, as you say, putting yourself in the shoes of your prospective customers and really having a deep understanding of the type of content they need.
I often suggest it's a good idea just to have a notes section open in your phone. And when you have those initial meetings with clients and they ask the sort of set questions, normal questions, just to make a note of those. And then if you do that for a month, you get to the end of that month, you're going to have a ton of ideas of how to develop your website, how to create content that is actually going to answer some of the queries that they might have. And that sort of got me thinking as well about what to call projects and how do you present your projects online? Because often we call them, a project in a practice, you know what it's like. It can go by one of about 5 different names. Even within the same practice, you refer to it as the address or the client or something else. But what's going to be meaningful to your next client? How do you make it relevant to them? So calling it 29 High Street, does that entice somebody to think, oh yeah, that could be relevant to me? You're just basing it on the visual. Whereas if you call it extension to a listed cottage or something like that, it's going to make people able to relate to it more quickly, and it will also help with things like SEO as well. So just, again, putting yourself in the client's shoes and thinking about why it's relevant to them.
Yeah, I love that. I think another suggestion would be to think of your portfolio, those projects. There's an opportunity for some storytelling, and people love a good story. I think rather than it just being quite a dry study on the building itself and the photos and the statistics of, contract periods and build costs, that's interesting information. But when you add a layer of personalization to it, where it's like, well, this is how David and Sarah renovated this derelict barn and to create their forever home, like all of a sudden that sounds far more engaging and interesting. That, somebody that's reading it, it's not just like Dove Barn, project 289. It's something tangible, like, people going to relate to that more, I think, the human aspect of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know sometimes that can be difficult, particularly with private residential projects, because clients don't necessarily want to be put at the forefront, but some will be happy with that. And there are other ways that you can tell a story and protect client confidentiality at the same time. So instead of just shying away from it completely and saying, oh, well, David and Sarah, your lovely example you gave there, would never want their names to be in it. But, there are other things that you can say. And there are other kind of workarounds around it that give those sort of personal details. Because I think you're absolutely right. It's having that emotional connection with the project is really important. Another thing that I notice about, whilst we're sort of still talking about websites, is that practices will, for example, put on Passive House Designer or RIBA Chartered Practice, and they'll stick the badge with great pride on your website, as you should do, because I know and you know that there's an incredible amount of work that goes into achieving that status, achieving that badge. But does your client know? Does your client actually understand, by employing a chartered architect, what are they getting? By including somebody who is registered with the Passive House Trust, what are they getting? What does it actually mean? So if you're going to use those kind of professional accolades and accreditations, also just think about, am I just assuming that the website users know what that is, or do I actually need to explain a bit about what is that, what does it mean, and what have I done to get to that point?
Have you got an interesting story about running your architecture practice? Have you done something different in your business that's been hugely successful? Or has a failure taught you an important lesson that you'd be willing to share? Then why not apply to be a guest on this podcast? Just click the link in the show notes to send us your details and get started today. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Now, let's get back to the show. Oh, that's such a good idea, Susie. I think, it's that thing of recognising where your prospective customers are at. Like, what is their awareness level of what you offer? And particularly if you're working with like domestic clients, that chances are that their level of awareness is pretty low compared to, say, a property developer or a commercial client that's been used to working with architects and doing lots of building development projects. This could be the one and only building project that they do in their entire lives. Like, why would they know like what a chartered architect does versus a chartered architectural technologist or a passive house designer? Maybe some of them might have picked up a copy of Real Homes or Home Building and Renovating and started to learn a little bit of terminology, but most people, they'll have zero knowledge of this stuff. So
and that's not just domestic clients either. It's also, you think about community-led projects or projects with charities, where you're a trustee of a charity and you're taking on a building project for the first time. You might be working with an inexperienced client and you need to explain this stuff to them.
Oh, that's such a good point. Thanks for that, Susie. So let's just do a quick recap. We've covered tracing the latest trends. So that was one of the first big time waster that we looked at. Then we looked at social media, chasing those vanity metrics. We then looked at producing content without a strategy, how that can be another huge time waster, and endlessly faffing with our websites. And the next one we're going to look at, relationship marketing. So networking and relationship marketing. That can be a great way to get work. It can be, and it does work really well for some businesses, but for others, it can be a complete waste of time and doesn't necessarily yield results. So why do you think that is the case? What mistakes do you think that people typically make when it comes to networking and relationship marketing?
I think often it comes down to following up. Because if you're not following up, you're just having a chat. And that's where it so often falls down. And somebody they might go to a conference or they might go to a networking event and meet some people and then just walk away, and then that's it. You never hear from them again. And then they wonder why nothing really comes out of it. You've got to work at those relationships. You've got to nurture them. You've got to follow up afterwards with an email, with a LinkedIn connection request. You've got to, and then, try and arrange maybe a one-to-one or drop in and with a sort of catch-up message a few months later. Otherwise, that's not relationship marketing at all. It's just loitering. So it's often in the follow-up, I think. Also, I tend to find architects are often quite fond of talking to architects, but not always talking to sort of the wider room and other networking opportunities. So looking for those opportunities, again, going back to where are your clients? Who are your ideal clients? And where are they? How are you going to get to them? Or how are you going to get to the other people which are in their sphere of influence? So, for example, planning consultants are often the first people to be involved in a project, sometimes before the architect even comes on board. So if you can't get directly to your clients, perhaps you can get to where planning consultants are in your local area and build connections through them. But also, you never know who's connected to who. So just bearing that in mind as well, in terms of thinking, sometimes you can walk away from an event and feel quite disheartened and think, I didn't really meet anyone that was really useful or relevant, or no one was really looking for an architect in that room. But you never know. You just never know where things can lead to. You can follow up, keep in touch with people. You don't know when they're going to meet someone else who needs to recommend an architect for somebody. So I think having that strategy for following up is really important. I've seen architects spend so much money on attending a conference or exhibiting and then be disappointed with the amount of leads that's then produced. But actually, often with those kind of events, it's not just about turning up once. It's about turning up consistently showing up. And then it's about following up as well. So there's a lot more work that has to go into networking beyond just being out and, getting in a room.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think networking, if you go to a networking event and you just go once and just expect that you're going to have like a stream of leads that come from it, like that's just not how it works. That actually being consistent, I think it's better to pick a small number of events that you decide to go to consistently to build those relationships with people. And over time, as you say, it's not necessarily that the people in the room are directly going to be your customers, but they could be great referral partners. They could be people that, have you front of mind because they've met you every month over the past year. You've met and had a coffee together or whatever it is at the networking event that you've been going to. And that whenever anybody mentions in their friendship group or their peer group, oh, we're thinking of doing a home extension or our business is looking at, building a new premises or whatever, like you're going to be that person that's front of mind if you do that consistently. And as you say, the follow-up, that's a classic thing that I've done loads of times as well, that like I go to events and then I have a nice chat with somebody and then don't follow up afterwards. And it's like, it's a waste of time and energy and money as well. Sometimes these events, you have to pay to go to these events, to go there and just to chat with some people for an hour or two and have a nice chat. Well, that's lovely, but that's not really generating those leads, is it? Whereas actually there's a lot of opportunity there. If you do have that follow-up in place, perhaps having something like a CRM system where you make a note of, okay, that's a really useful connection I've made today. I'm going to put a note in my CRM or on my Google sheet or my Excel sheet I'm going to follow up with them next month, or I'm going to send them a LinkedIn request in a couple of days once I get back to the office. you touch base with them frequently. It could be some people it's once a month, others it might be once a quarter. But yeah, I think that's where the magic happens, isn't it? When that follow-up and consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you use that phrase, about, it's that whole thing about staying top of mind, isn't it? Because really, I believe that marketing works best when it's done little and often. That's why I called my company Low Marketing. It's little and often. And it's that consistent approach, and having that little consistent drumbeat of keeping in touch with people helps you to stay top of mind. Because most of the time when you meet somebody, even if they regularly employ architects, at the moment you meet them, it's pretty rare that they're going to say, yeah, I was just looking for an architect for that specific project right now. How often does that actually happen? Never.
Hardly ever.
So it's about, for when the point comes round that they are at a point where they're ready, that you are front and centre, and that they're thinking, oh yeah, I met John, or I've heard of him, and yeah, I know just the guy, or I know the guy to go and ask about that. And that takes consistent effort, little and often over time. And marketing often isn't about the big bang of spending lots of money on redesigning your website or rebranding or exhibiting a very expensive conference. It's about those little kind of drip feeding efforts over a period of time. And if you can do that with a clear strategy, it's a way that it can stay manageable, it stays consistent, and it can actually bring you results, and it can help you ride out that roller coaster of peaks and troughs in your pipeline. Because that's another thing that's a real challenge for architects, is you get busy with work, you're busy with a project, you ignore marketing because you haven't got time, you're just flat out trying to get this deadline in, trying to get this planning applications in, meeting client expectations. And then when you've done that project and it's all complete and it's all brilliant, you go, oh, what am I going to do next? Where's the next project coming from? Oh, actually, I haven't really done any marketing for 6 months, 12 months, because I was so focused on that project. So trying to encourage architects to just keep that drumbeat of marketing little and often going in the background, I think is so important.
That's such a good idea. I just wanted to pick up on something else you mentioned earlier, Susie, when we started talking about networking, relationship marketing, that you mentioned about that architects tend to like to talk to other architects. And I think that's so true for all of us. I think that we naturally gravitate towards hanging out with people that are like us, and which is totally understandable. I get it, absolutely. And I've definitely done that. Like, I've gone to events where it's like, oh, this would be a fun event to go to because it's full of other sort of marketing people and podcasters, and oh, that's nice. But are those my prospective customers? Maybe not. That's the thing, that if I'm going to go to a room full of people that are all the same as me, where maybe if I was wanting a customer that was like a large corporate client, if that's what I was looking for, then I need to hang out at events where those decision makers hang out. So it's kind of like recognizing that, and it might mean then that you're not just going to a networking event or going to an event because it's just to hang out with people like you. There is a place for that for sure, particularly if you work from home or you work on your own. Is that going to lead to those leads and inquiries, that actually pushing yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone to get in a room of those people that are your ideal clients? Like, you would like to think law of averages would say that you're going to get more higher quality leads from that room of people, or more chance of getting some leads from that group. But I do also appreciate that you mentioned the other point you mentioned about people's readiness to buy. Like, what are the chances that you go to any event and somebody just happens to say, oh, I was literally just looking for an architect? Chances are they're not. And actually, there's been lots of studies done on this about buyer journeys and people's readiness to buy. And actually, this goes for kind of anything, really, that in any kind of group of people, I think the statistics were around that whatever your product or service is, that statistically in any group of people, there's probably only 2 to 3% of those people that are at a point when they're ready to buy that thing. So what about the other 97, 98%? You know, how are we nurturing that? How are we warming them up? How are we keeping front of mind with those people in the meantime, so that when they do get to the point when they're ready to buy, we are the people that they think of first? And that's where this little and often comes into it, this consistency with your marketing efforts that you've mentioned a few times in this conversation, why that's so important. Otherwise, we are continually stuck in that cycle of feast and famine, where we're busy delivering the client project work and then at the same time neglecting our marketing efforts, and then finding ourselves that our pipeline isn't full. And they're now like, oh my goodness, we need to do some marketing. Panic. Let's do something quick. Put some Instagram posts out there. Let's hope we get some clients.
I think another tool that I have found can really help with that is often when I'm working with a practice or a sole practitioner on what they're sort of coming up with a succinct and sensible marketing plan for their business, you know, what is actually going to work for them, what's going to be realistic for them, is to work out, okay, if there's going to be, and there's been some brilliant studies into this, which I can't recall the name of at the moment, but the number of sort of touch points that have to happen between somebody first becoming aware of you to being at the point where they're actually ready to commission you for architectural services. And there's a lot of touch points between those two things until they're ready, and actually mapping out what might those touch points be can be a really helpful exercise, so that then you're not stuck in that situation of thinking, oh, I've not heard from them. I'll just drop them an email and just say, just checking in, or have you seen my proposal? I'll give them a call. And then you've got like 2, 3 checkpoints, and then it feels awkward and it feels a bit weird. So plotting out actually what could those touch points be? What could I send them? What would be useful? Have I got a newsletter? How are they following me on social media? Have I got a recent project that would be really relevant? Have I got some FAQs? Have I got some more information about how the whole process works? Or have I got a sort of smaller, lightweight service, which is just a little site assessment that just might help to kind of build us in a stepping stone towards becoming a full service client, and to map out what those points might be in that journey, so that then you're prepared and you've got something to fall back on, rather than sort of just scratching your head and worrying about picking up the phone and feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think Google did quite a well-publicised study. There was a paper that they published, I think it was called Zero Moment of Truth, I think. And that talked about the typical customer now needed 11 interactions, 7 hours, the equivalent of 7 hours of engagement with you in 4 different locations before they typically got to the point where they're ready to buy.
Yeah, and I think if I remember rightly in that study, they were not looking at high-value professional services. So when you transpose that onto the environment that you're working in, which is actually a really high investment piece, I think it's probably even more than 11 touch points and 7 different kind of locations. I think it could be even higher than that. Yeah. So working out what those are, that can just really kind of help you feel more prepared.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, Susie. I mean, you think how long we might be in. Let's say you're buying a car or booking a holiday. Like you're booking a holiday, like how many hours would you spend, researching it and thinking about it? The period of time leading up to it before you actually decided to buy the holiday and book it can be a long time. Could be months. So if you were then doing a project where you look at the overall investment that somebody's making in a project, including the architecture fees as part of that, but this could be the biggest investment that they ever make in their lives. They could be thinking about this for years before they're actually at the point when they're ready to buy. So when you think then of the number of interactions and touch points that they would need to be able to make a buying decision to work with your practice, that they potentially need a lot of nurturing to get to that point.
And it's all about building trust, because what you need to make that decision and think, I'm ready to go and this is going to be a safe pair of hands, is you've got to build trust. And that takes time and persistence. And it's the small things like saying, I'm going to follow up on this email and call you in a week. And you do call them in a week. And it's, saying, I have listened to the conversation we had in which you were particularly interested about different kind of more natural forms of insulation, and I've been away and I've researched it and I've listened, and these are some things that I've come up with that might be of interest to you. And it's all those steps all along that process. What you're looking to do is to build trust with that prospective customer, just in small iterations along the way.
Susie, this has been a great conversation. We've covered loads in this conversation today. We've covered those 5 big marketing time wasters, but we've also shared some great ideas as well that people can use in their marketing. What would be the main thing that you would like everyone to take away from this conversation?
I think everything that we've talked about today, whether it's cutting through the noise, stopping what doesn't work, all of those things come back to having a sound marketing strategy. They come back to having a plan and being intentional in what you're doing with your marketing. And that's what I aim to do with small practices. So I run marketing strategy workshops with sole practitioners and small practices to try and help them figure out that where are you now, where do you want to be, and what are the marketing tools and tactics that are going to help you get there so that you can avoid wasting time on marketing that's getting you nowhere.
I love that. Was there anything else you wanted to add about the topic that we haven't already covered?
I think just don't be afraid of letting people see the real you and showing some personality in your marketing, because clients hire people and they hire people that they feel that they can trust. And so I think I would encourage everyone to just be yourself and put some of your personality out there.
Yeah, I think that's so important these days, particularly with the avalanche of AI-generated content that we're seeing online, that the best way to stand out, it's share your face and show a bit of personality, and try and get comfortable doing that. It doesn't feel comfortable for many of us, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think it does go a long way, for sure. Little and often.
That's the key.
So there's one other question I wanted to ask. It's a travel question, because I love to travel to discover new places. I just wondered if you could share one of your favourite places with us and what you love about it.
That's so hard. I've travelled a lot, but actually in thinking about this question, I'm going to talk about places in the UK, and I'm going to keep it local. I love getting to the coast. Whenever I can, I like to go to the coast. Holcombe is a favourite. I love Holcombe. There's also some really good architecture there as well. I love the bird hide there and cafe. That's a beautiful little building. This summer, we're just about to start the summer holidays when we're recording this, so I'm looking forward to going to London and seeing the new V&A East, the Storehouse. I think that looks like a really interesting building. And I'm looking forward to going to the Henry Moore Foundation, where they have his studio and sculpture gardens in Hertfordshire. I like getting out to those kind of places that you can spark your creativity.
Some great suggestions there. That the beach at Holcombe, it's just so good, isn't it? Incredible.
There's that sense of huge skies and space, and there's some lovely walks around there, and Even on a wet, windswept day, it's just a lovely place to be.
Fantastic. So, Susie, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Thank you for sharing your expertise today. Where's the best place online for people to connect with you?
Find me on LinkedIn, Susie Lober. That's where I tend to hang out. But if you'd like to find out more about my marketing strategy workshops, then just go to my website, which is lowmarketing.co.uk.
Perfect. Thanks again, Susie.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me, and it makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode. And if you'd like to connect with me online, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online is LinkedIn, and you can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club,